Hello and welcome. Wherever you are in the world today, thank you for joining us for the Rise Traveler, unpacking conversations of sustainable travel. We are here to talk to eco-minded and socially conscious travelers, diversity and inclusion specialists, wildlife conservationists, environmental activists, and anyone using travel as a way to uplift and inspire. Together, we will go a step beyond the Instagram-ready world of travel and take a look at how travel can be a source of growth and development for all people and all communities. And now, here's your host, Amy Hager.
And today, Taylor's joining me from DC. And Taylor has such a unique story because she was actually one of our first students and also received a tuition grant for our pilot program. And so, Taylor, I want to start out today's conversation with the very beginning. How did you hear about RISE?
Hi, Amy, and thanks for having me on today. First off, it's really great to be here. So I heard about RISE actually through one of the instructors in the pilot program, Milena Nikolova. She and I are both alumni of the George Washington University School of Business, but I actually met Milena through a project I was working on this past year for the World Bank. We were part of a team that worked on a tourism development, not quite a plan, but tourism development ideas and opportunities for Russia. So it was a really amazing experience. And, you know, as we were working on that project, she was mentioning some of the other things she was involved with and mentioned RISE, and I just wanted to learn more.
I think that's one of the beautiful things that we do here at Rise is it really is that community, bringing people together and really sharing experiences and sharing our knowledge. And as I said it before, you did receive one of our grants, and that's part of what the fundraising efforts are for today as well, is to continue to give out grants. But tell us, how did receiving the tuition grant really help you in reaching your goals with receiving the certificate?
So, the timing of these classes was sort of perfect for me. I mentioned I was working on that Bank project at the time, but I was actively looking for work. I am a tourism professional by trade, but as everybody here probably knows, during the pandemic, tourism got hit pretty hard. So, in my kind of off time, looking for other career opportunities and things like that, I absolutely also was looking at investing in my own professional development, looking at different classes and things like that. And so when Milena mentioned the Rise Travel Institute, I was like, oh, this is literally perfect timing. I'm looking for something to do over the summer that'll help me keep me in the field while I'm actively looking for jobs. It was something I talked about in interviews and things like that.
I love that you're able to bring it to more of your professional setting. I mean, that's what the goal is. So tell us a little bit more about your professional background. You're in travel, you're in tourism. How did you get started down this path?
As everybody is on this call, I've always been passionate about travel. I always loved to travel my whole life.
Yeah.
For my undergraduate studies, I tried to make sure I had like a bit of an international focus. So I studied international business and marketing, as well as Latin American and Iberian studies. Through that, I got to study abroad a few times in Spain. I went back for a second time because I loved it so much and my experience there so much, and knew I kind of wanted to be in the travel space based off of those experiences I had. So I worked in the real world for a few years, decided to pursue higher education in tourism. So I went to the George Washington University and got my master's in tourism administration. And there I specifically focused in sustainable destination management. And actually shout out to a few of you on the call today who also went through or are going through that program right now. It's great to see you all. So through that experience, I went through, got my master's a few years back. Since then, so for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been involved in a lot of different sustainable tourism development and consulting projects for destinations, mainly in the US and also in the Caribbean. And then I just recently got my first taste of Russia as well, as I mentioned before. But now I'm kind of shifting gears from the consulting world and going back to education, which I said I love. I've always had a passion for professional development, and I want to share that my knowledge and education with others as well. So I am now currently managing a professional certificate program in sustainable tourism and destination management for George Washington University. And I also work for Destinations International as their education and certification manager. And Destinations International is a trade association specifically for destination managers and people involved in destination management and marketing across the globe. They bring these members together, provide educational programming, resources, toolkits, things like that to support them in their tourism development and management endeavors, which ultimately we're trying to help them support their local communities.
I love that. And so it really seems like you are deeply rooted in sustainable travel and tourism. And so I want to ask you, since you did complete our pilot program and recently received our certificate in sustainable and anti-oppression in travel by submitting a capstone project, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but why is it important to you to hold this specific certification?
That's a great question, Amy. So my background was specifically in sustainable tourism from my master's degree and the work that I've done. But I think more and more, as we've seen over the last year or two, that anti-oppression piece, I really hadn't had too much experience with before. And I also haven't seen that really offered anywhere else. I have done a little bit of work with Indigenous tourism, but I think the certificate really took it like a step further than I've seen others do, and from what I've seen from my own experiences in education as well. So for me, I feel like this certificate is really, really up to date, timely, definitely with the current and emerging trends too. Regenerative tourism, for example, that's definitely like a new way of thinking about things that takes it a step further than sustainability. And so that's why I was really interested specifically in this certificate program.
I love to hear that from you, because that is one thing that we work on so hard to make sure that we are staying on top of current issues. We don't need to be talking about what happened in travel in 2010 because, well, that's really not what's happening right now in 2021.
Exactly.
And so even though, our main focus in our modules will continue to probably still be very similar, there is going to be a different flavor and a different experience in every single course. And so it's so great to hear you say that we're achieving our mission of being on top of what is actually happening in the world. And we can't not ask you about your travels and about what you've been up to. And so tell me, can you share at least one story of a travel experience that really changed either your perspective on travel, or maybe you were able to create a change within the area that you visited?
Sure. So two come to mind. My first, the first memorable trip I really want to talk about is I got to, as part of my master's degree, I got to do a summer consulting abroad project in Indonesia. That was my first trip to Southeast Asia, and also my first experience doing sustainable tourism consulting work in the field. So, going from the US to Indonesia, going to Southeast Asia for the first time, quite a different place. Definitely some culture shock there, but to be able to actually work in the field, working with locals, working with local government and communities on different projects that are actually going to make a difference for these communities, it really inspired me and is what kind of pushed me to go into the sustainable tourism consulting world. Then from the personal side, more of the vacation and leisure side, my most memorable trip is actually what inspired my capstone project for the pilot program here at Rise. Back in August, I was able to go on one of the most amazing vacations for a few weeks in Canada. I went to the territory of Nunavut, Canada, which is very, very, very northern Canada, and got to do some Arctic travel up there. Never been to any sort of Arctic destination in my life before, but got to spend 2 weeks just exploring the region. I mean, we weren't even The closest you can kind of get to the North Pole while being comfortable in the summertime. An amazing and eye-opening experience.
And so then why was it important to you to choose that trip to feature in your capstone?
So, from the eyes of like me being a traveler there and I wasn't there for work, which was nice first off. But, from my own observations when I was there, the entire time, I really couldn't stop reflecting on the fact that I felt like my travel behavior there was not very sustainable at all. I mean, the whole point of Arctic travel is you're traveling to extremely remote and fragile environments, extreme environments. To get there, gosh, I think I took like 3 or 4 different planes just to get there in the first place. And I was like, oh my gosh, the impacts of this on the environment cannot be good. But to see some of these, to see climate change impacting a destination firsthand like this, I mean, the photos we even saw, what I saw in person, I don't know, seeing this thing with your own eyes is just different than reading about it, in books or reading news articles about it and things like that. So what I wanted to do was, as a traveler, reflect on my own travel behavior while I was there in the Arctic and really understand if my actions or going on an Arctic trip could even be sustainable in any sort of way. So what I did is I used some of the lessons I learned through the pilot program, and in particular, one of the frameworks from the Sustainability Lab about the 5 different, I think it's called the 5 fundamental domains of sustainability, to really assess the destination I went to, Nunavut, the key challenges and opportunities of sustainable tourism in that particular destination.
I love the pause and reflection that you did, right? And I think that's part of the beautiful things that we do here at Rise is we know we all have maybe misstepped, and at least taking the time to reflect and then developing the plan for your next travel, your next thing, and making sure that we continue to be mindful travelers is really, really important and really key. And so I think, hearing how and why you chose that as your capstone and you taking that pause to reflect, that is just absolutely amazing. And so what I want to ask you, and I know I didn't say that I was going to ask you any questions like this earlier, but for those of us who are listening today, who do a lot of travel, who are on the road a lot for work, who may not be thinking sustainability at the top of our minds, is our pilot program and our program here at Rise like something that just a general traveler should be taking and should be considering, just so that way we are looking to the future and we're more mindful?
I definitely think so. I came into this program as a tourism professional, but I looked at doing my capstone project through the eyes of just being a traveler in general, not as a professional. And these weren't like questions I was asking myself when I was traveling back, 6-7 years ago. It wasn't things that was really crossing my mind. And I think these sorts of questions that the program brings up, these sorts of ideas and concepts that are talked about, I think it makes your travel experience a lot more enriching when you think about it in a certain way. I mean, of course, going on vacation is great, right? You can just get to relax and things like that. But I think you get so much more of a memorable experience when you're looking at it from these different perspectives and angles that we talked about in class. In particular, there was the book that we read for the class. I think I have it right here, no joke. The Beyond Guilt Trips book. Yeah. And how you think about yourself. That just happened to be right here because this is my office desk. But if I had that book back when I was studying abroad in Spain, I think my travel experience would have been totally different. Not that it was bad in any way. I had a wonderful time, but I think I don't know, I would have gotten a different perspective of things being there had I known some of the stuff that I know now.
Yeah. And I think that, again, just not even to hit it home, it's thinking about what you're going to do next. How can you make that small tweak? How you can make that small mind shift, that small change that is going to create a better impact for the area that you're visiting. So, well, I've got one more question for you, Miss Taylor. So you have decided to stay and help us at Rise. So I am so excited that you are joining us as our university outreach and relationship manager. And so I'm wondering, why are you staying on board? What really has attracted you to continue supporting our efforts here at Rise?
I had such a wonderful, experience in the pilot program, not just from all of the content that was provided and resources, but really all the people involved, all the students that took place, like my cohort. I really enjoyed learning from those people as well. And, as I said before, if I had like some of the information and some of these concepts, some of these resources back when I was studying abroad as a university student, I think I would have just gotten a bit more of an enriching experience out of that. And I want to be able to share that with other students as well. I don't want, I even remember back when I was studying abroad, people that were coming from other schools into the same program as me from the US didn't really know what they were doing there. They just kind of had their transcript of classes and kind of went to class and then went off and, maybe partied at night. But they didn't really know what else they were really supposed to be doing there and what all they could have been getting out of that experience. So, to be able to share these resources with university students kind of open up their eyes to a different way of looking at these places and how tourism and what they're doing there really impacts those communities, whether positively or negatively, I think is an important thing to share with others. So I'm hoping to do that here with Ryan.
Well, we are lucky to have you and welcome aboard. And thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. I really appreciate you sharing your story and what an amazing journey you're on.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it.
And for those of you who are listening today who like what you've heard and you'd like to hear more, please subscribe to our email list at risetravelinstitute.org/subscribe. And we'll be back soon with another episode. But until then, keep roaming, keep learning, and continue to be a Rise traveler.
This podcast is an extension of the Rise Travel Institute, a 501c3 nonprofit committed to empowering young travelers through educational programs, research, study tours, and scholarships. Visit risetravelinstitute.org to learn more.